We are streaming live now, and you are on the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Shane Needham, where our theme is never be outworked. And I know Chris and Mahmood and the rest of the University of Idaho athletic department and the administration and student athletes and parents are definitely an example of that never be outworked mindset. They're working really hard, not only for athletics, but to see what education looks like in the fall during COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. So we're going to have a great show today. So a little bit about introductions here is you are on the Secrets of Success podcast. You can follow me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. We are streaming live on Facebook. You can go to my website at drsneedham.com and find all previous podcasts we've done there, some more information about me, and some other really good quality information there as well. That we're recording this live, this will be available in a week or two also on the other streams such as SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Go follow my YouTube channel and the other media platforms as well. And so I'm so excited to have Mahmood and Chris on the show today. And so Chris is Director of Athletic Training. I'm going to let him introduce himself as well as Mahmood here in a minute, but he's Director of Athletic Training at the University of Idaho. And Mahmood is Associate Director of Development in the Athletic Department at the University of Idaho. So they're in my hometown. I love it. I talk to them a lot, and I've had some great conversations with them and their student athletes and the university. And I'm super excited. Now we can take callers today, and I will take your callers. And I want to let you callers know you can call in at 877-995-2111. That number is being streamed on a banner on the live feed right now. Call in, and if you have questions, we will try to answer them. Let us know who you are so they can answer the questions to the best way possible. Are you an alum? Are you a student athlete? Are you from another state? Do you have NCAA questions? And there might be questions that they can't answer and that they just can't, because this is a very fluid situation right now about how athletics are training, but it's a very important one as well. And so Chris, can you first introduce yourself?
Yeah. So as you said, Shane, I'm the Director of Athletic Training Services here at U of I. For everybody out there that doesn't know the term athletic training, we're not strength coaches, we're sports medicine. So we're really in charge of the day-to-day healthcare of our student athletes, along with our team physicians and so on. So I've been here for about 6 years. I got here in 2014. I've worked with a number of sports, primarily, I started out with soccer, women's basketball. I've worked with our golf, our tennis. I've worked with our football team for the past few years. So that takes up most of my time.
Sure.
So yeah. Long days. And again, healthcare is kind of that's what we do day to day. So this isn't outside of our realm, obviously. I was, when this whole COVID thing broke out, I think a lot of people were looking at what are we going to do to fill our time? I have not had a problem with that. So if anything, my workload is doubled. So
wow,
thanks for having me here. I'm excited though.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Chris. And so Mahmood, I just learned this a few months ago. He is homegrown Idaho, and that is awesome. So he's, I guess, raised in Idaho a little bit, at least from Moscow. So Mahmood, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate. I have 2 degrees from the University of Idaho. I have a bachelor's in business marketing and a master's of education. I worked in intercollegiate athletics from 2003 to 2010 at the University of Idaho and at the University of Colorado. Was away from the industry for 9 years. I went to work for the Idaho State Bar / Idaho Law Foundation, and was honored to return to intercollegiate athletics and the University of Idaho in March of 19. So kind of a full circle, married with 2 kids, a son, Zane, who's going into 5th grade next fall, and a daughter, Ara, who's going into 2nd grade. Both of them are involved in sports teams and club sports themselves. So as a parent, this conversation's of significant interest to me as well, just because those conversations are taking place at their club levels.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And what's going to happen with clubs and traveling teams that our kids are on, Parks and Recs teams, those are all in question. So this is a great topic. And so one thing that I like to do in my professional life, and I consider you guys a part of that, but also my personal life, is, how did we meet? And I've met so many people over the years, and you guys are two that I've met that have just been great conversation pieces. We've had great conversations with some of the athletes at the same time. And so, Chris, describe how we met and how it's important for me for networking and just knowing that, all the information that I've, as a scientist and as a professional and a personal person that I've gained over the years, the most important part is building relationships. And so, Chris, describe how we met that you remember.
Well, Shane, I probably knew about you before you knew about me. Just your name's out here in the community. You're a big name out here. So, I think, gosh, we met earlier this year. We were really just showing you off our fueling center. So we implemented or put together a fueling center this year, which is, a way that we can feed our student athletes. So obviously that was a whirlwind of a startup over the last summer. So this was our first year of putting it all together. And, so really, we heard you were interested in being involved and with our athletic department and mainly in that fueling center. So we met and had some really good conversations, and you had some really good ideas. So I think that's how we met.
Yeah, that was great. And I love where that's going. And I want to continue that conversation, as nutrition is so important to the student athlete. And it was really cool to meet them as they came in and out of the fueling center. And so it was really, really cool. So I look forward to those developments as well at the athletic department at University of Idaho. So it's great to know you, Chris, and I appreciate that. So Mahmood, we've met several times, and tell me the story, what you remember.
Yeah, so I remember in November, we had a quick handshake conversation. I met through the late great Pete Isaacson at the University Leadership Breakfast, and I too have heard your name in the community and your involvement with the University of Idaho, not only on the athletic front, but the great work you're doing with our Veterans Administration program, our College of Business and Economics. And so, I think Jenny Hall, who's Director for Corporate and Foundation Giving at the University of Idaho, kind of set the stage for us to have a formal in-person meeting. And that was that first week of March. That was the last time I saw Chris, just because it was a few days before COVID became a reality. When we met that first week of March, I think there was just some rumblings out there in the media, and it affected the Puget Sound area, but it hadn't necessarily spread across the country. And so our relationship, I guess, Shane, has continued through emails, text messages, LinkedIn, and now a podcast interview in COVID world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great. I remember all those conversations and all those meetings, and it's just a pleasure to know people in this great community of Moscow, Idaho, and at the University of Idaho. So go Vandals. I'm super excited to see where we go, not only today, but where you guys go next year. And also hear even how previous student athletes have been affected because of winter sports and being canceled and so on and so forth. So let's just get going. There's lots of questions and callers. Again, if you want to call, you can call in at 877-995-2111. Now, if we're in the middle of a conversation, I will take your call. I won't say anything, and you'll just be on hold, and you'll be able to hear me and Chris and Mahmood just speaking. Okay, but we will get to you. If you hear an answer button and the phone's not ringing anymore, you're on the line, and we'll get to you. Okay, we'd love to hear your questions, because we really do want to know what the community has to say about this, because we know that sports. What's interesting during all this is, a lot of people say, well, sports, I guess COVID-19 has proven that sports and athletics aren't as important as health. That might be true, right? But at what point do we move forward, and how do we move forward? And it is a great, venue to bring families together, to bring student athletes together, to showcase your university. And I was talking to Chris offline about how concerned I am about some of the student athletes that there's some student athletes, quite a few probably, that their only real shot at an education is through scholarship and through, playing sports. And that concerns me if that might not happen in the same capacity. And so it's a big deal. This is a big deal to our communities, and certainly to me and to our kids that are playing not only youth ball, but that look up to these student athletes and want to go to places like the University of Idaho. So let's just start right in. So let's start with Chris. Tell us about, we just recently, as everything's been evolving, we hear about the June 1st mandate that kids can come back and train, or universities can be open. And this is so open-ended questions. And today's June 1st. So what is the current status with training of athletes as we prepare them for the fall? What's that current status, Chris? Go.
So the NCAA lifted their moratorium on they're called voluntary activities. So somebody who's, if you're around sports, that would mean basically that the student athletes have access to working out in a voluntary fashion on campus in the weight rooms, utilizing the facilities. So NCAA lifted that moratorium, so student athletes are allowed to on June 1st. Doesn't mean every school is going to open up. Doesn't mean that all the student athletes will be back. So, but that obviously kind of opens the door for those opportunities to begin happening. There's a number of schools within a few schools within our conference that have decided to open the doors today. As with throughout the country, some places aren't even considering that right now. Even within our conference, there's some schools that are, they're not at that point. We're not at that point today. From our department standpoint, we're getting prepared, obviously. But there's a lot that goes into that. I wish it was easy as, just opening the door and saying, welcome back. And, Terry told us, our athletic director, that it was a lot easier to close than it is to open back up. And that is the truth.
Interesting. So describe that a little bit, how you say some schools in the conference, for example, are opening and University of Idaho has decided not to open right now. And what is that? Why is that? Why do different schools do different things? And really, I guess what your main thing is more about the University of Idaho. So why aren't they opening like right now on June 1st? Tell us what those challenges are, Chris.
Well, I think, to say that other conference schools are opening, that's true. I think one thing everybody needs to know, though, is that a lot of this is dictated by the state guidelines. There's multiple different guidelines that come in here. NCAA kind of lifting that as one thing, but we need to follow our state guidelines along with our campus. So, a school over in the Portland area, they're not thinking about opening today.
I see. Yeah.
So I think it's the schools are, the institutions, I'll say are, everybody has their own policies and everybody has their own plans and resources as well. So we do live in a smaller community, so resources aren't as readily available in some of the bigger communities. So those are a couple of the challenges that we've faced, but nothing that can't be overcome. And we're working pretty hard at it. So
absolutely. So Mahmood, on your side, what do you see as the biggest challenge for, and I guess how is this summer different than maybe past summers? And what do you see as a challenge in the athletic department? How do you see that as a challenge?
Yeah. So, I think in order to look towards the summer, I wanted to take a step back real quick, Shane, and March seemed like a lifetime ago. What was interesting was some of the logistics of returning student athletes to campus and back to their homes with the cancellation of the Big Sky basketball tournament. And we had our men's tennis team en route to a match, and we had to get them back home due to the NCAA canceling events and then the conference canceling events. And so before I answer your question, I want to give a shout out to our student support services department led by Krista Gray, who coordinated all of our academic support. Like many institutions of higher learning, our campus as well, our university went to a online learning model and held classes online. And so just last week, we were excited to announce that our student athletes' cumulative GPA for the spring was a 3.5. So that's 300 plus student athletes getting a 3.5. And I don't know what Chris got in school, but I imagine that's probably he and I combined. If you look at maybe our freshman year, but of the 300 plus student athletes,
that was my freshman year too.
That was your freshman year, yeah. So maybe all three of us combined, we can get to that 3.5.
Yeah. Congratulations to both of you and the whole department, University of Idaho Athletics Department. That is amazing. That's incredible. Good job.
And we've got to give credit to our students. 268 of them had a 3-point or higher, and of those 268, 124 had a perfect 4.0. And when I look through the majors, you got medical sciences to microbiology to mechanical engineering, computer science, anthropology. So it's a wide range of majors at the University of Idaho. And what's also great is our student athletes went back into their respective communities and just like us, did what they could to help their neighbors and help their fellow mankind. And a great story that came out of the Boise media market was Damon Thacker, who's from Meridian, Idaho. He spent spring break at a local food pantry and helped individuals who were driving up and gave them a box of food. And he was practicing at that time what was a concept that wasn't familiar to many of us, practicing that social distance and wearing a mask, etc. So kudos to Damon and all of our student athletes out there trying to make their community a better place. But for the summer, when it comes to fundraising for our athletic department, we had to postpone, cancel, or put on hold some of our annual special events, and particularly our golf tournaments. And it's an opportunity for us to rally the Vandal family in their respective communities. Our athletic administrators, our coaches make a point to make it to those events. If that's in a golf tournament in Hayden, Idaho, or in Moscow, or Lewiston, or Boise, Nampa, etc. So those have been on placed either canceled, like I said, or placed on hold. And so we are hoping that come mid-July, we can get that going again. We have a couple of events scheduled for mid-July in the Treasure Valley, late July in the Magic Valley, and then in late August up in Coeur d'Alene area. So if we can get to a point where we can get our fans together, our donors together, and get to that place of normalcy, I think that'll be something that we would all appreciate. From a fundraising standpoint, we're hearing what a lot of folks are hearing as far as just uncertainty in their own pocketbooks and just wanting to take a little hold just to see how the economy rebounds. We're hearing terminology that we haven't heard for quite a few years, and then layoffs and furloughs and pay cuts. And so we're just trying to engage folks similar to what you're doing here with a video conferencing and phone lines. That's kind of our new norm. Phone calls, text messages, emails, a lot of Zoom meetings taking place. That's kind of the new norm for us right at this point.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And so as you talk about some topics, it reminds me of some things that I want to talk about. And I talked a little bit to Chris about this, and I wanted to hear what you thought in Mahmood, but maybe Chris is the better one to take this. So you guys tag team this or whatever you have to do. But you talked about tennis, you talked about basketball. I'm also a wrestling fan. I know University of Idaho doesn't have wrestling, but there were a lot of those student athletes in the middle of basketball season, conference season, that they're ready to win a championship on a team or individually with tennis or wrestling or basketball, whatever it would be. And they lost that opportunity. And that can be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And that same team and those same formats may never be together again. Can you explain, Mahmood, the decision on, I know a lot of people were upset about it as a fan, why the NCAA did not give those athletes an extra year of eligibility?
Yeah, so I can't answer why winter sports didn't get that extra year of eligibility. I do know that there is legislation that the NCAA is allowing spring sports student athletes to return for an extra year, and there's kind of a domino effect. If you're a senior, you get that extra year. If you're a junior, then you get kind of 2 years and so forth. So it comes down to the coaches having to manage their roster and determine where they want to allocate their scholarships. Some schools have said, yes, we're bringing everyone back. Some schools have said, no, we're not bringing anyone back. And we're kind of in the middle, where we're just allowing our coaches to have those conversations with our student athletes and determine, particularly those who were seniors, if they wish to return for an extra year. And some have said, yes, they want to. Others have said that they wish to move on. If that, some have plans to go on to grad school, and others have interest or possible employment already. So I can't speak, and I don't know if Chris, if we ever heard why the NCAA didn't tackle that winter sports, and particularly those who might have been on the basketball front who weren't able to go on in the conference tournaments and the NCAA tournaments. I can't speak to that. Chris may know and may have heard otherwise.
Chris, do you know of a reason for that? It perplexed me actually in this situation.
I don't know if it was a reason, but I have heard that they played their entire season minus the conference tournaments and the postseason tournaments. So I think that played in factor in it as where the spring sports obviously they played a few matches, if that.
I see.
Track and field didn't do anything. I know tennis played a handful of matches. Golf, I don't even think they had their first tournament. So a little bit different. I think we're in a little bit better situation at U of I because our spring sports are a little bit limited in the sense we don't have baseball, we don't have softball. So numbers wise, we're not taking a big hit on that. But I was actually really surprised. And I think Mahmood was, or our whole staff was, that a lot of these student athletes, they're excited to get out there in the world. They've done their 4 or 5 years, and they've worked really hard, academically, and they're ready to get rolling. They're really ready to get their career start. And you think about that from a spring sports standpoint of they'd have to come back an entire year. So it's not just a semester. So yeah, so we haven't had any complaints. I think we've handled it quite well here. So we've been fortunate.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. And so, Chris, overall, I imagine it's difficult to keep in touch with the student athletes. However, how are they doing? How are the student athletes doing that are waiting for fall to come?
I think across the board they're doing well. We have 315 student athletes, so I will admit I haven't called every one of them. I've talked to a lot of them though, and the ones I've talked to are just chomping at the bit to get back here. They really are. They're really excited to come back because this is their life, and it's not just athletics; it's school as well. I mean, they're young adults. This is their opportunity to be on their own and be independent and to grow. And so a lot of them want to come back. There's quite a bit of them that are back in town, working part-time jobs, and finishing off school. Some of them are going to summer school. So I think it's a very positive vibe, just all across the department, all across our student athlete body. So.
That's wonderful. And so before we move on to what you think the fall is going to look like, so when we talk about facilities that are open, Chris, and you actually can roll that into how the campus is open as well. What is it if facilities are open and the campus is open? How is it different? Is it at half capacity? What are the requirements? Do you have to wear a mask? Do you have to social distance? I know in Idaho, gyms are allowed to open again, I guess public gyms or private gyms, whatever you want to call it, that you can go to as members. And they've done some things that make you distance a little bit, but what are the requirements on campus?
Obviously the same, guidelines that are out there for the general public with social distancing or physical distancing that they're calling it now. Wearing masks. I don't think that's not a requirement at this point, but it's definitely it's something that we should be doing and has been recommended. So facilities around campus, I think they're starting to open piece by piece. Again, it's campus hasn't been closed, but the buildings aren't staffed. So if the buildings aren't staffed, they're not going to be open. I know our campus rec has worked really hard to get that up and running, and that's a public space, so they're in a little bit different situation than we are, and they're looking to open next week. But obviously, there's a lot of protocols that need to be worked and adjusted over time. A lot of precautions that they're taking down there. I know, scheduling out certain spots in the rec facility just to ensure social distancing and room capacities and monitoring how many people are in the room at one time. So there's a lot of stuff involved with it. So
wow. And so Mahmood, thinking about the fall and moving forward, what does it look like as far as, you spend a lot of time in our capital of Idaho, in Boise. There's a big population base there. You traveled there a lot. I don't know, how many days a month did you travel before COVID-19 to Boise? Half time or something, maybe?
Yeah, I'm actually based in Boise, so I'm going the reverse way. I'm going up right north, and so yeah, since mid-March, I've been grounded, just like everyone else. So we haven't been traveling the region or the state. I'm jokingly telling folks I'm in my house with my family 22, 23, 24 hours a day. I might be able to get away to a grocery store here or there, or get to the office to check mail, but we're not traveling, and the restrictions in place are at least through President Scott Green and what he's asking of University of Idaho employees is at least through the end of June. If you do have to travel, coordinate with your supervisor, and obviously he's relying on guidelines from Governor Brad Little and folks at the Department of Health and Welfare. So as far as the fall goes, there was a great article, Shane, that your listeners might be interested in. It was in the on May 21st. I read it on ESPN.com, and it's titled "Financial Toll of Coronavirus Could Cost College Football at Least $4 billion," and that's only at the the Power 5 schools, so the 65 schools who are in the larger conferences, and so. Jokingly telling someone recently, they said, "Well, we're going to play in the fall," and I said, "Well, that's the $4 billion+ question." Wow. And Patrick Reisch, who's the director of sports business program at Washington University in St. Louis, conducted the economic impact. And so I think you have one side where you have athletic directors, athletic administrators, university presidents who are looking at what does fall sports look like from a safety standpoint and the new era of COVID-19. And then you also have what does it look like from economic impact and how does it affect universities' bottom lines. And so it's extremely fluid situation. There's no question about it. And we talked earlier about the NCAA having their guidelines, recommendations. The Big Sky Conference has guidelines, recommendations. Obviously, the governor and his COVID-19 task force, that they're bringing forward different guidelines that are being adopted by local health districts and municipal city leaders and university administrators. So wish we knew what the fall looked like, but it's so fluid right now. It's even having the conversation last week has changed since Thursday when different parameters came forward. So I imagine more and more will be coming out during the month of June to determine what does fall look like for fans and teams and conferences as a whole.
Well, that's an interesting, Mahmood, and that's good information. I know you're involved in fundraising for the athletic department, which is very, very important, and the economics. So I want to focus on some of that because not only do I want alums and other people who can to support their team. I mean, support their either local or regional or their wherever they're an alum at, support that. I mean, they need those financial resources. Describe how that works, I guess, in two ways. So you have scholarships for the student athletes, and you got to think, I don't know the details of this, so I'm just asking dumb, blind questions. So you have scholarships for student athletes, and I'm not sure how those are funded and how they can be funded per NCAA guidelines. And then you have, so obviously the school and the university and the state puts in a certain amount of money, and then external money comes in too, right?
Absolutely.
And so how does that work, and how is it all affected? What are those percentages, and what are, and what if you don't have external funding because of a poor economy? Is it possible sports can't happen, or do you have to make cuts to sports? Just be open. What is that, and how can we help?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And I think a huge misconception out there is your student athletes go to school for free. And there's no question they earn the opportunity to get an education through representing their respective university. But all institutions across the board are asked to raise those funds to help support athletic scholarships. So to give you an idea, Chris mentioned we have 315 student athletes at the University of Idaho. Not all of them are on scholarship. Some are on full scholarship, some are on partial scholarship, and a partial scholarship may be, a half scholarship, or maybe just, here's enough to help you buy books, or enough to for room and board for a semester. And so we have the equivalency of 185 full scholarships at the University of Idaho. And the cost of a full scholarship is $20,000 per year. Wow. And so that's about $8,000 to $9,000 for tuition and fees, another $8,000 to $9,000 for room and board if that's living on campus or living off campus, another $800 to $1,000 on books, and then cost for summer school if they if a student athlete wishes to go to summer school and is able to, and help them either get ahead, academically, or make up a class if necessary due to competition they weren't able to take. And so when you take the 185 scholarships and you multiply by 20 grand, you come up with, and you add in summer school, you're looking at a $3.64 million investment. And those are funds that are directed right back into the institution through tuition and fees, room and board, books. If they happen to live off campus, that's money that's going directly into, in our case, the city of Moscow, or into Latah County, and dollars our student athletes use, just everyday expenses like we all have, toiletries, if they want to go to the movies, if they want to go play pool somewhere, if they, want to get a bite to eat. So what we are asking our alumni base and our fan base to do is to invest in our student athletes, and that's through the Vandal Scholarship Fund, and that's our top priority. Any dollars we don't raise through the Vandal Scholarship Fund, then basically our athletic department needs to take out of our operating budget to help fund those scholarships. And so the Vandal Scholarship Fund is our top priority, but we also are asking our alums and our fans and those with philanthropic interest to assist our sports-specific programs. Chris mentioned our fueling center earlier, so we have different initiatives, capital projects, asking individuals to help through endowments where their giving can live on in perpetuity. And then, if we've done our job and if we've inspired them, then when the good Lord takes them, maybe they have left some of their treasure through a planned gift for the university as well. So it's something that we focus on daily, and we try to match donors' interests with opportunities we have within the athletic department.
And so how is it exactly that people can find that information to give to the Vandal Scholarship Fund, or to give to the athletic department, or Vandals in general, or University of Idaho? What's the best way? Do you have a website or a link or something like that that you can tell the listeners, and then I'll actually post it online as well so people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So two websites to consider: govandals.com, and you can click on support the Vandals link, or you can go to uidaho.edu/give VSF, and that'll take you directly to a giving page.
That's awesome. Well, if you can give during these times, it's important to these student athletes. It's important to our universities, and I know that our community will step up. I know that Vandal alums will step up, and it's a great program that I definitely support. I want to continue to support. So, thank you for that information, Mahmood. So, as we start talking about, and Mahmood kind of answered it, we don't know what fall sports look like, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So I want to go back to Chris, because I mean, I was looking last night, and it's a whole different issue, but sports are important to our American community and to the world. It's a way where you can kind of, I guess, forget about some of the real big issues and problems and just relax and do the enjoyment and look at student athletes, watch people play sports, and kind of maybe for a couple of hours just kind of get in your own zone and forget about other things. And I think that that's very important for a healthy mindset and healthy emotionally. And so I was looking at baseball and what baseball is going to look like this year, and I'm not sure if Major League Baseball is going to play at all. It looks like and it might be more of a owner versus players that can't come to an agreement, but it just caused me to think. Then they start talking about, well, what does fall football look like? And so that's what I want to hear. I've heard so many different things locally in the community. I'm sure there are rumors, Chris, but what do fall sports look like? And let's think about the big ones. On the women's side, volleyball, and then on the men's side is football. And so, what are those? Do we know what those look like at this point?
Well, I saw that same article that you're referring to about baseball, and that's sad. I think you're getting obviously the business side of it along with COVID involved, and it's sad to think we may not have baseball this summer. It's like the good old strike year. But I think as a department and as a conference, and I'll say from a college sports side, I think everybody's getting prepared. I think we're trying to do everything we can in stages to get to that point so we can play and start the season on time. There's been all,
by the way.
Yeah, there's been all there and like we've said before, this is changing daily. It's very fluid. If you would have asked me a month ago, I don't know if I would have been very convinced that, hey, we're having a season, but I think everybody was kind of there. So it's just all over the place. I think last week, or when the NCAA lifted that moratorium to allow voluntary workouts, a lot of people got excited. We're going to open June 1st. We're going to open June 1st. And then, reality kicks in of, okay, you got to have a plan in place. So, and all these different scenarios that that you hear, and, what if a player tests positive? What if an opposing player, a visiting team tests positive? What do you do? Is that going to cancel the games? All this, flights. There's so many different scenarios that we have to have a plan in place for. But I think the important thing is we're forming those plans. They're good plans. We rely a lot on our team physicians and experts in their field to help guide us in those decisions and those plans. So we're taking those steps, and I think everybody we need to be optimistic. I think we need to have that goal to say, hey, we're going to be ready for that first game, and if something stops us in between, then it does. But we're moving full steam ahead.
I love it. So be ready for the first game. So let's go to that. So obviously players can play, I guess, if you're going to have the game. And so I've heard different things, like, for example, for football, I've heard, but only half the players can suit up or something. Is that true?
That's pretty standard. It's not half the players for a typical game, but not all players on a roster are suited up for a game. And I think a lot of people may not know that you go on the sideline and, there's a lot of young guys, the freshmen that, practice type players that aren't on the field. They're up in the stands watching like everybody else, supporting the team. So roster sizes may be cut down a little bit in terms of active rosters. And
is that a health concern, or is it maybe a financial concern? And Mahmood, you could jump in here as well. But is it mostly because of COVID-19, or is it also a financial concern?
Well, I think it would be COVID related. I don't think there's any financial side to that. And there's a lot. There's a lot that could happen between now and then with testing and,
sure,
who are we going to test, and do we have the ability to test 75 athletes, or do we only have the ability to test 50 at a time? So a lot of different things that could play out between now and then. But I think the idea behind it is, you want is the very minimum amount of personnel and athletes on the field at one point in time. So
that makes sense. I'm so excited to hear that you guys have a plan. That's really exciting to me. I can't wait to be back in the Kibbe Dome and to see some games. And that's the question. You talked about fans. What does it look like for fans? What are you guys hearing now as far as who can go? Who can go in a stadium?
Yeah, we're still working on those plans. Again, there's a lot of time between now and September. So,
yeah.
But I think the big point is that we're planning on having fans.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mahmood, do you want to add to that? It looked like you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously the number one concern that we have is fan safety and making sure folks are comfortable coming to the games. And that's something you're seeing, nationwide. Every athletic director is working with their, fellow administrators at the conference level, working with their university presidents and with their own respective athletic department administrators, just to put some of those plans in place and contingency plans at this time to say, okay, what does it look like, and how do we make sure that the everyday fan feels comfortable coming to the game and leaving feeling like it was a safe environment. And so for us, and I think it's across the board, if you're having this conversation with administrators at other universities, it's just having collaboration with numerous entities on and off campus to make the right decision with the information we have at this time. And so what we do know is at the university level, President Scott Green has indicated that students will be back on campus this fall.
Yeah,
so that's what we're working towards. And Chris and I and our entire athletic department and our coaches and our student athletes, we're working towards football in the fall and volleyball and soccer and cross country. And until we're told differently, that's the plan in place.
I love it. I love to hear that. And so I guess a question is, Chris and Mahmood, expand on this, because Chris and I were talking. I think you were off. You weren't online yet, Mahmood, but I didn't know this. And so, you hear the NCAA say things, and then you hear all these other teams saying, okay, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. But what Chris was explaining to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Chris, so you explain it. Who makes these decisions on who plays, who can travel, can your stadium open? Who makes those? I was assuming that it was the NCAA, but it doesn't sound like it's that easy. Chris, can you expand on that? Because that's certainly something as a fan and just a general public, I thought the NCAA made these rules and they just shut down sports, but that's not the facts. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to, what is the state allowing us to do? And, trickle down from there, obviously, is the institution. So every institution has to make that call for themselves. So, yeah, I mean, the NCAA has listed their core guidance on resocialization and bringing student athletes back. And it's a good set of guidelines to go by. But again, it's different everywhere you go. And so we're making that obviously Idaho's own plan.
Yeah, I think that's how it should be. And I'm excited to hear that, because it doesn't make any sense that, Moscow, Idaho, or Boise or whatever should be treated like LA or New York. It just doesn't. And so, but that also brings in some challenges that we've talked about earlier as well. So what about, okay, so I assume you guys have a fall schedule, who soccer is going to be playing, who volleyball is going to be playing, who football is going to be playing. What about those teams that won't come and play, or they won't let you go there and play? What's the plan?
Yeah, so that's kind of a fluid situation in itself where, in our case, the Big Sky Conference is monitoring and working with each respective institution. And, we have member institutions, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Montana, Arizona. I don't know if I'm missing any states, Chris, jump in if I am, but each state has their own opening parameters and their own guidelines that they've implemented. And, in Idaho, what we know is there's phases through end of June, but What we don't know is if the governor and his fellow experts are going to have any guidelines in place after June 30th. Is something different going to look like come July or let's say come August or September? If they have to revisit the matter, do things change? And so same thing. Our colleagues at Portland State, they're working with their governor and their local health folks, and in California, same thing. So what we do know is we have dates of games when we're scheduled to play teams, and that's where we're working towards. But we can't make any promises that on October 31st we're scheduled to play at home in football. We can't say for certain that our opponent's going to come play us at this time. And on the flip side, like I said, we don't know what's going to come out from the state of Idaho in August and September, and we could easily be on the reverse end of that. And so,
it's true.
Fluid situations, no question about it.
Well, and I thank you guys for being so fluid and dynamic, because it is a dynamic situation. It sounds like you guys are just rolling with the punches, and I love that. That's great, and fans love to hear it. And I'm actually really excited about this June 30th date. I don't want to hear any promises, but Chris, do you want to expand on anything Mahmood said?
No, I mean, I think from my side of the house, and I think everywhere within the NCAA and our department, the health and safety of our student athletes is our top priority. So I know there's a lot of talk about games and getting back to things, and I think we all need to remember that we're not going to put them we don't want to put them in an unsafe environment.
Okay? Of course.
And obviously there's an assumed risk with sport. And this COVID is a different dynamic. I mean, we don't typically, we think about concussions and serious injuries, traumatic injuries like that, but we don't think about, disease and virus on a regular basis. If we have somebody that comes down with something, we can just pull them out. So this is a different situation in the sense of, there's a lot of different factors. If one person has it, we're going to have to we may have to limit a group of people. So, a lot of things to think about.
Well, I understand, and you guys are doing a great job and being very fluid. And I tend to be an optimistic person. I'm going to hope for June 30th that we don't see any spikes in cases throughout this month, and maybe we can be at full capacity by the fall for sports, because that's so exciting. I mean, especially for our local community. I love going to Vandal games. You're in the dome, and I hope they serve concessions. Please, I'm crossing my fingers. I got to have a Vandal dog. So anyway, well, thank you guys very much. And so we're, the Vandals are in the Big Sky Conference. And so are you seeing that all conferences are going to, in the NCAA, kind of remain, I guess, united? I've heard rumors like this, like you get big schools, big states like Texas that say, hey, the NCAA is not going to tell us what to do. We're going to just play our own games. Whoever wants to come to our stadium or we go to their stadium, we'll have like our own little league. Is that even possible? Can you do that? Silence.
Sure. I mean,
so you could actually do that, and the NCAA wouldn't sanction you or anything?
I guess anything's possible. So the NC2A is made up of college administrators, coaches. I think there's industry experts, student athletes, former student athletes. So, in essence, Chris and I are part of the NC2A, and so while there's individuals who have been hired to lead the organization, they've been hired by folks at a higher committee level who are comprised of athletic administrators, coaches, etc. So, you have your Power Five group who I think over the past few years has indicated or shared comments, not necessarily collectively as a group, but as individual coaches and administrators, that maybe a change is forthcoming. So anything is possible, but at this time, the University of Idaho is committed to the NC2A and working best with them and seeking their guidelines and as we move forward, as we kind of move through COVID-19.
Yeah. Well, that's a really, really good topic, and it's a really good answer. And I really appreciate that honesty. We just don't know. That's what a lot of these questions are. And so as we think about the fall season and we think about all these challenges, you guys are both optimistic. I love that. What are you, Chris, what are you most excited about for the upcoming fall season with all the challenges? What are you most excited about? What gets you to work every single day with a smile on your face?
It's really, I think we all get into this profession because we love sports, obviously. And it's so much more than that. I think being around the student athletes on a daily basis is really, it's part of our life. It's an important thing. So these past few months it's been difficult. I tell everybody, this is a lifestyle. I mean, we work long hours. We work all the time, 7 days a week at times. And it's, this is what we do. And if you didn't like it, you wouldn't get up in the morning and do it. I'd be doing something else. So I think just having that, getting back to it and getting back to the practices and the swing of things and seeing all the faces and having those conversations with all the student athletes and the smiles and just everything. I mean, I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most. And, does that mean that, games might be a little different? There's definitely going to be a lot more involved on my end of the house. It's, I think week to week, it's going to be a challenge, but I'm excited. I look at it this way. I'm the only athletic trainer at the University of Idaho in the past 100 years that's had to deal with something like this. So I look at it as a challenge.
That's great. Well, by the way, you're doing a wonderful job. So Mahmood, what are you excited about for the fall? What are you excited about?
Yeah, like Chris, the work Chris and I do is on behalf of the students. And so just those moments of seeing them crack a joke or watching them leave the dome from a workout to class, I think that's been sorely missed. For me, the opportunity to connect and reconnect with donors and fans and alumni, that's something I thoroughly enjoy, and to hear their Vandal story. And so I'm looking forward to getting back to that. And I think the largest excitement I have is what does that fall look like? None of us have a crystal ball and we can't fast forward, but let's say we're having this podcast visit in December around the holidays and kind of reflecting on what did the fall look like, evaluating ourselves, seeing how we could approach things differently, what went well, what didn't go well. So utilizing, I guess, the fall more as a teaching moment for all of us and a learning opportunity for ourselves collectively and individually. It'll be an interesting ride, that's for sure.
It will be, and I'm excited for it too. And I follow a lot of the University of Idaho athletes on different social media platforms, and I know they're excited to get back into training, get back to campus, get back, to, for example, for football. They're super excited about that, and it must be the leadership that you guys have too that's a big part of that for wanting them to get back to campus. And I just want to let you know, as a community member here in Moscow, and not necessarily a University of Idaho alum, but somebody who's very passionate about the university and wants to see it succeed, is I have confidence in all the leadership at University of Idaho. And I'm really excited about that. It's going to be challenging, and I want you to know there's a community that backs you guys. So just keep that in mind. There might be some naysayers out there, but there's a lot of people that want the success and have confidence in you guys. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing. As we're getting close to wrapping it up here, and on my show, I've always wanted to ask everybody that comes on. I had one of my guests, we talked about failure, and she said she doesn't believe in failure at all. She only thinks that things happen for a reason, and then that you just change because of that, and you do something different and you improve because you learn from that mistake. Maybe it wasn't even a mistake. It just happened. And so I'm going to ask you guys both the same question, and it's name one thing in life that externally somebody maybe thought you failed at, or maybe even only you thought you failed at, but it caused you more success later in life. And it might have been years later, but it caused you, put you on the right trajectory, that apparent failure. Chris, I'll let you go first.
All right. Oof. I think looking back, just throughout my lifetime, education's been a really important thing for me. I worked hard in high school, went into college, dropped out. I dropped out of college after my first semester and joined the military. I think having a little bit of independence, I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So joined the Coast Guard, and I always tell everybody that was my 9 years of being a student athlete. So it's kind of different world, but a lot of rules, a lot of discipline, and a lot of responsibility, and it was good for me. I needed 9 years to kind of straighten myself out, and it was good. But I always regretted not finishing school and going to school. So the whole time I was in, I took classes. I have probably 300 credits of just random, wherever I was stationed, I took credits and I took classes, and and I felt like just not having a formal education, after high school really limited me. So I made that leap to get out and go back to school and jump into a career. And my first career I jumped into was civil engineering. I went to school for that for a semester. I found out that I hated that, and and I got into athletic training, and I loved it from day one. And it's something that if I wouldn't have had all those years to really value getting an education and finding a passion in a career, I would never be here today. And so that's something that's obviously I came to University of Idaho, and I've jumped through the ranks, and I am where I am, and I'm really happy to be here. So it's a blessed opportunity.
Awesome. That's a great story. I didn't know that you had served in the military or in one of the armed forces, so to speak, or whatever they want to call it. So thank you for your service, Chris. That's a great story. It's a really, really great story. Well, thank you, and thank you for being a great athletic trainer at the University of Idaho. So, Mahmood, you're next. Name one thing and it could be in your personal life, your career, whatever it is, that maybe was an apparent failure, but it caused you more success and put you on the trajectory that you are now.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, from 2003 to 2008, I had the opportunity to work for the University of Idaho in a similar capacity. And I was having the time of my life. I was traveling the state, traveling the region, accepting more and more responsibilities. And I guess one could say I was married to the job. And I read a book right around late 2006, 2007 timeframe that was from written in the 30s. The book is titled "Think and Grow Rich" by Napoleon Hill.
Oh,
and, one of those books that just changed my life. Sounds like you're familiar with it, Shane, but in case your listeners aren't, it's a gentleman who interviewed the who's of the time, going back into the early 1900s, from the Henry Fords to the Charles Schwabs to the Andrew Carnegies, and among numerous other successful individuals who had wealth and had power. And kind of the only book I've found out there that kind of talks about the meaning of life. And what I realized was I was failing miserably at a work-life balance. I had met a beautiful woman at the University of Idaho and followed her to southern Idaho. We moved in together. She moved out just because I was more committed to my job than to our relationship. And after reading that book, I kind of realized I needed to reassess my life. And luckily, I went back and got her after a few years, and she was still there, still available. And come July, we're going to celebrate 12 years of marriage with 2 beautiful children. So I guess what I realized in reading that book is you got to take success of taking one day at a time. It's okay to breathe. It's okay to spend time with family and friends. And so I really think I would have been a failure as a husband and as a father had I gotten married, at that point where I was more committed to the job. And so I feel fortunate that I was able to take some of those life lessons. And I guess you have to ask my wife and kids if I'm succeeding, but I think I am based on our day-to-day interactions.
That's awesome. That is a great story. And some people never understand that until it's too late, when they're 60, 70, 80 years old. It's like, I've always said that nobody ever says on their deathbed, I wish I would have worked more. And it doesn't mean that we have to be lazy, but it's the relationships, personal networking, professional, it's the relationships that we really have to nurture. So that's a great story, Mahmood. Really, really great story. So we're wrapping it up here. You guys have been amazing guests. And I want to wrap up the show with saying, go visit govandals.com and go visit the University of Idaho website and give to the university if you can. It is a great institution. I won't go off on the statistics about how good they are in engineering and science and other things, because they just are. That's what I'm going to say. One of the top valued universities in the nation. I would say that hands down. And I know most administrators, and I know our president at the University of Idaho, Scott Green, would say the same thing. And I truly know that for sure. So it is a great institution. So govandals.com if you want to support our student athletes, or go to the University of Idaho website. You can see where you can give there as well. Chris and Mahmood, you guys have been great guests. I really appreciate it. And when we can actually not social distance, which is kind of now in Idaho, let's get together for a lunch. Let's get together for a breakfast, whatever we can do. And let's talk about all student athletes and all things Vandals.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shane.
Hey, thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you, Shane.
We will talk to you soon. Have a good one. Take care.
All right. Go Vandals.
Yeah, go Vandals.